Good evening to all of you. We are recording and we have Eva with us here. Just to briefly introduce Eva, and this is also probably for the first time that we are having a colloquium outside of the International Coaching Week, when I think Damien addressed us on supervision, and I was going through a program with him. Eva was my supervisor, or she was my supervisor as my being a supervisor. So I was supervising a coach and I was discussing my cases with her. And it's one of the best experiences that I had, being, in a sense, mentored or coached or supervised by someone as experienced that as Eva is. And it also happened that Eva was being supervised by Fiona Adamson, who I had the pleasure to meet, and some of you have talked about. And Fiona also came up in the International Coaching Week Colloquium last year. She's one of the most renowned supervisors. She's a fantastic coach in transpersonal coaching. We hope to be working with her in many ways. And Eva trained with her, and that helped me a lot in terms of continuing the pattern in which Eva was working with me, and I was able to sort of continue that in some way with Fiona as well. So what today Eva suggested was that in supervision, there are three different approaches or functions: the developmental, resourcing, and a qualitative function. And she would explain that. And she suggested that she would like to take up today's topic as a resourcing function, which actually integrates others also into it, which is about how the supervisor is able to provide a very supportive space for the coach. And in that way, the coach is able to process the experiences of the coach working with the clients. At the same time, far more importantly, as it did to me, the way that she worked with me, was to encourage me to be far more self-reflective and to be able to find that inner space within me, to be able to understand why I was doing certain things. One of the things, many of you have been in the supervisor webinars with me, and we have talked about the 7-eye model. And there is the 6th eye, which is about the coach's own awareness, which for me was a mystery till almost towards the end. And it was when I discovered it, I found it was probably the most powerful part of coaching, supervision, and in a sense also that of coaching. So as we go on today, at some point in time, my own request to Eva, because she is also an EMCC coach. And we had talked about quite a bit in terms of how supervision and coaching overlap, but at the same time, they are different. And you need to hear from a master that she is. I'm just a beginner in this journey, and I learned a tremendous lot from Eva talking to her. And I'm hoping that today she would be able to cover the resourcing function in supervision in a way that helps many of you to understand the commonalities and perhaps some differences between supervision and coaching, and how supervision can in fact help you towards mastery in coaching, which certainly to me is one of the greatest benefits that supervision had for me. I leave you to Eva, and if there are any questions, as usual, please put them on the chat box or raise your hands. I will promote you to the panel to ask those questions. Eva, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ram. Thrilled with this opportunity. I love to talk about supervision. And thank you all. We have 46 people here tonight, so that's absolutely great. So a little bit about me. I live in Rio, Brazil. Fiona's here. How beautiful. What a treat. What an honor.
Thank you, Fiona.
Oh, lovely. So a little bit about me. I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro. I have lived abroad, and I have family abroad. And there's a small story, a little story that I like to tell when I first present myself. is when I became a coach, 2005, 2006. That's when I started my journey as a coach. Before that, I was an executive in the shipping industry. Never worked with HR. I worked with ships, very operational and then strategic. So everything was new to me. And ICF was pretty new in Brazil. And one day they asked me to make a webinar, to present a webinar. I think there were 30 coaches in ICF at that time in Brazil. Now we are about 600 ICF coaches in Brazil. And I was preparing for that webinar. And I opened the PowerPoint and would close it, and open it and close it. And I just couldn't do it because all that time, all that occurred to me was, I'm going to speak to other coaches. What is it that I have to offer to them? I was going to talk about active listening or powerful questioning. I don't know, one of the competencies. And I said, but they know all I know. What is it that I have to offer? And I couldn't start. Well, in that particular week, there were floods in Rio. And I stopped to watch the news after closing the blank PowerPoint again. And they were showing like a camp where the people who were suffering because of the floods and had to leave the houses, they were getting all sorts of donations. And a man came in a very poor bike, and he was very poorly dressed, and he had a small bag, a very small bag. And the news person spotted him and went to him and said, are you here bringing a donation? And he said, yes. Do you mind if would you mind to show what you will be donating? And he took a pair of flip-flops, those sandals, old, worn, and an old t-shirt. That is all he had in his bag. And he said, you know, I'm very poor. That's all I have to give. If I had anything more to give, I would. But I cannot forbid myself not to give whatever I have to give. And I had tears in my eyes watching this man, and I still get very emotional when I think of it, because this man taught me a lesson. We give whatever we have to give in the hope that it will be useful to someone, because that's what he said. Perhaps it might be useful to someone. So this is me with my little bag, trying to, whenever I speak to coaches, I always have this, oh my God, what is it that I have to give? So be in my little bag, and I hope it's useful. The way I thought we might do this is a small presentation on what supervision is. And because I spoke to Ram before, and I understand many of you are already familiar with some concepts of supervision and the seven-eyed model, and others are not so familiar. So perhaps we might start from everybody on the same page. And then what I will propose is I bring a case that will show us how important the resourcing function is, as well as the other two functions, but why it is my opinion, and that is just my opinion, that the resourcing function is even more important than the other functions. Or let me put it differently. It is the resourcing function that enables the other two functions. And we will come to it. And of course, having Fiona here, I've been working with Fiona regularly as my supervisor since 2012. And whatever is in my little bag was very much shaped by what I learned with and from Fiona. Right, so let's share my presentation and share screen. Here we go, and so here we are. So I like to call it supervision. Right now, I'm involved in a project of pro bono supervision to coaches being trained as coaches, still trained as coaches in the very beginning of their learning journeys in Ethiopia. And this is called the Ethical Coach Project. It's a beautiful project, and I'm one of the volunteer supervisors. And what happens with these aspirant coaches is that they don't show up for supervision. And I was trying to figure, they do schedule, and I was trying to figure why do they schedule and they don't come? And finally, someone just showed up last week, and I said, what was your expectation of supervision? And she said, well, I thought you're going to manage the process here. I said, what would change if we wrote this like this? We're going to have a supervision about your work as a coach. And her face lit up, and we had such an important and amazing conversation. So I would say the word supervision may put you off, so let's work with that concept. It is a disciplined reflection and relation practice. And the word relation is absolutely fundamental for me in the understanding of what supervision is. Of course, relationship is important in coaching, but in supervision, we take it to another level. And our goal is to focus what's going on what's going on in the coach's own process. And this I learned from another supervisor, where the personal may be intruding in the professional, because our personal is always intruding everywhere. And we have to be able to stop and take a distance, a helicopter view, and to see what is it in us that is affecting our work as coaches. We will take questions, so I will just go through this, and my suggestion is we then take questions and discuss the case, okay? You will find definitions of coaching supervision in ICF and European Mentoring Coaching Councils. I just brought this one, but I wouldn't want to spend so much time in going through the definitions, but rather to share with you my view about the distinction between mentor coaching and supervision, which is important for us to start the conversation. So this is the definition by ICF. Is a collaborative learning practice. So the word collaborative is important. Learning is important. Practice is important. To continually build the capacity of the coach through reflective dialogue, another two very important words here, and to benefit his or her client and the overall system. And when we talk about overall system, here's already a big shift in the understanding of what supervision is as compared to mentoring. Because when we are supervising, we are looking at the whole system, and we're bringing in the system into the conversation, because we're looking at how the relationships inside the system are going on, and how one relationship is affecting the other relationships. And we'll go into a little bit more detail as we look at the seven-eyed model. So you will get more information about this on the website. I can share the slides with you on a PDF if you, what's that? That's you. I just had a crash on my PowerPoint, so let's try again. And if not, we'll just talk. Can you see it, Ram? It's opening.
Yeah, it is. It's opening the.
There we are again. Okay. So let's move here. Oh, I know what's happening. The Microsoft Auto Update decided to shift something here. So some typical cases that we have in supervision is, perhaps I'm being too critical of myself. Perhaps I'm being too critical of the client, this is quite common. And this is not something you would see in mental coaching, or I feel stuck working with a client. This you might see in a mental coaching scenario. And what is the difference? In the mental coaching scenario, you're working to help a coach develop his expression of the coaching competencies. So very much focused on what he's doing or she is doing and how she's able to express her knowledge into the way she does. So the word to do here is important, and the expression of the competencies. So we're focusing on the competencies, and as mental coaches, we, as you know, typically work with recordings so we can give feedback to the coach on where his strengths are around the competencies and some suggestions for development. With supervision, we don't listen to recordings usually, unless we're mentor supervising a supervisor in training, which was my work with RAM. So I have worked with Fiona now for 6 years consistently. Fiona has never heard any recording of mine so far. We might do that one day for fun because we like to experiment. So this is something that you wouldn't hear in a mental coaching conversation. This is a pattern that a coach may find out about himself or herself, that there are some behaviors that, or patterns of behaviors that he's beginning to notice in himself or herself when he's working with certain kinds of clients. Teenagers. I recently had a supervisee who, for some reason, she usually works with executives, but also with teenagers around career issues. She likes to work with them. She's very good at challenging executives, but she couldn't challenge the teenagers. She couldn't use, for instance, direct communication with them. She would just stop and hold herself, and she didn't know why. So we explored it together. And we found out, and Fiona's gonna love this because we found that through body work, that her coachees, the teenagers, they would usually talk to her in a couch, just like this, very relaxed. And this was affecting her own somatic work because she was sort of mirroring their relaxation like this. And when she fully embodied herself as a coach, she found out different results. So you can see what we're looking at is who is the coach being in his relationship with each of his or her coachee. Just some typical cases. I'm going to try and put this, every time, okay. I just want to have them, see, it's the auto update that is, sorry about this, but it happens with auto update. I wish I knew how to do this right now, how to stop this.
No, put it on manually check.
Okay, next time.
Okay,
just closed it, thank you. Let's just jump to one more slide, and then if it shuts down, we can just we won't need the slides anymore. So this is the Coaching Supervision Academy logo or motto or lemma. I don't know what to call it in English, but who you are is how you coach, and we're looking at that during supervision. And usually we have this persona of successful coaches and very professional, but we all have this human being behind the persona, or the several persona we have. So we are supervising the human being behind the mask. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So quickly, the 7-eyed model. So we have a system, and let's think, of course, we could have group supervision, but we're talking about individual supervision here. So these are 3 important elements: the client, the coach, and the supervisor. And we will look at what is happening in those conversations and relationships from different angles. That's why we call it the 7-eyed. Peter Hawkins and Nick Smith call it the 7-eyed model. So the first eye is, who is the client and what is he bringing to the coaching conversation in his relationship with the coach? What's his issue? What are his goals? This is not too different from mental coaching. And the second eye is, what are the interventions? How is the coach working with the client? What was the agreement? What models did he use? Any assessments, any 360s? So what kinds of questions? So this is business as usual for us. And then we start expanding, and that's where supervision is totally different. What is the relationship between the coach and the client? And we use metaphors, for instance. If it was a dance, what would it look like? And we can use different metaphors, like if you were both lost in an island after a shipwreck, what would the roles be like? So we can play with it. Or we can talk about the relationship, embodying what the relationship looks like, which is what I did with the supervisee I just told you about, who was sort of relaxing with her, was engaging in a more relaxed conversation with her teenager clients. And then we will look at what is the coach's experience. What emotions are there? What are his thoughts? How does that impact his somatic reaction? Whatever he's experiencing for being in that relationship. And then we'll look at the relationship between the coach and the supervisor. And this is where everything happens in supervision. It is in the mutuality of learning that we explore everything. And this is a place for extreme vulnerability, much more vulnerability than in coaching. I usually say we have to get naked to go into this space, naked of our fears of being found out, of being judged, of the desire of wanting to look good. We just have to be completely ourselves in that relationship. And then there is the supervisor's experience. What does the supervisor experience in the here and now of the relationship with a coach? And how does this serve as information to try and understand what's happening in the whole system, in the wider system, in the context, or in the field, whatever word you may use, or energetic field. So the supervisor will use himself, herself, and usually it happens through intuition, somatic reaction, images that come to your mind and you don't know why. And you just reflect that back to the coach and explore together what might be happening in the whole context. So for instance, the supervisor might feel, I don't know, until the coach. Somehow I have the feeling right now that you're expecting me to give you an answer. And I keep on wanting to give you an answer and say, no, he's expecting me to. Is there any possibility, can we look at that together? Any possibility this is what's happening between your client and yourself? And then usually 90% of the time, yes. And then usually what's happening is that the client, the coachee, is also feeling himself or herself in a position where the context, the organization, is expecting him to come up with answers he cannot provide. So we look at that to explore in a very tentative way, very careful, just as information, and it's absolutely fascinating what is revealed there. And as I said before, the system is important. So in the definition we brought from ICF, it is to the benefit of the context, of the system. And we have Peter Hawkins here. Peter Hawkins, I've listened to a few of his presentations and webinars in supervision networks we belong to. And he says, we have to learn to create the we Q. It's time to move from the IQ to the we Q, collaborative intelligence. And that means extending the empathy to the whole system. And I find this brilliant because it's quite common that we may listen to a story from a coachee if we are not paying attention to that. And we say, oh, that's a toxic organization. And we build our empathy with whatever problem the coachee or the client, the coaching client, the coachee is going through. And then he becomes the victim and the whole system is a problem. Now we have to learn and extend our empathy to the whole system. And when we do that, and it's not easy, but when we do that, for instance, by bringing the system into an empty chair, we may try a Gestalt exercise. I've done that sometimes. If the system were here, what would the system be telling us? What would the system require from us? And it opens up a whole new conversation. So this is something I'd love to leave with you, this empathetic view to the whole system, because we're all there trying to make it better. So finally, I'll try to move the slide. If it doesn't, we don't need it anymore. But here's the resourcing function of supervision. I usually bring this image when I talk about supervision because that's my experience of supervision. So I'm talking first from my own experience, what happened to me in my learning journey and what I notice happening with my clients. There's a lot of shame and guilt and not knowing where to go when you come to supervision. And to be able to hold this space, to nurture the coach. We are people who listen to other people. And in our lives, not necessarily we're listened to with the depth and quality that we extend to other people. So to come to this place where someone is listening to us and really not judging us and helping us to see whatever we need to see to open up our vision and understanding of the whole system and the relationships in there. To me, this is absolutely priceless. So we talk about the qualitative function. We talked about the developmental function and the resourcing function. Now, qualitative function of supervision is many times you don't know or notice that you have an ethical dilemma going on and you just don't pay attention. So in supervision, we're looking at these relationships and the ethical aspects and helping the coach notice ethical aspects he may be blind to. Developmental, because it's a way to develop yourself and learn. You just by noticing, You can try new interventions. You have access to different tools. The supervisor may share them with you, or articles or videos or poems. Any tools that we might share with coachees. So it's a growing journey. You get better and better. And so much so that ICF will give you 10 continuing education unit CCUs for your credential. For every 3 years, you can use up to 10 hours of supervision as CCU credits. So it is developmental. But for me, as I said, the resourcing is more important. And Peter Hawkins separates the word. He says resourcing. So you can connect to your source. Instead of working from effort, you can be from source. And when you're being, not working, we don't use the expression to work from source, but coming from source, being from source, then you can bring a different energy, and you're not draining yourself, and the whole world gets a totally different meaning. So for me, if the capacity to resource yourself, to be in a relationship that is nurturing, not nurturing in parent-child sort of way, but professionally nurturing, humanly nurturing, then you cannot fully explore the two other aspects, the developmental aspect and the qualitative aspect. And I have a case that I'd like to discuss to illustrate this, but I think we could stop here, take questions, and then I would share the case, because I think this case completely illustrates what I'm trying to bring. So is it okay to do that?
Absolutely. I've got Michael as well as Larissa. Larissa was with me in Damien's class. So, I mean, there are people who know about supervision. Michael is doing supervision. And of course, the Master of Masters is out here. I'll ask them, I'll let them ask the question. But at some point in time, what I really would like you to do, if you can, Eva, is to address the issue of the somatic aspect in terms of I6, because that is where really I found, you brought me there in terms of trying to help me, because that was my block. I just couldn't, all my training with ICF competencies on MCC level was about the coach not offering anything, because that might be a suggestion, it could be an advice, and I conveniently overlooked that aspect of the intuition being shared, which ICF competencies allow. So that was something that helped me tremendously. And within that, one of the things that I found was to be able to feel it in the body and to be able to express it is far more powerful. And I still remember, and I was talking to some people earlier today, in the ICF, the colloquium that we had, Fiona took a session. In 2 minutes, she changed the state of a person by asking her, that person, maybe she is here today. She asked her, Shanaz is here. Shanaz very much here today. She can share her experience perhaps later. And she was sort of holding her hands together or something like this. And Fiona just made an observation about that. And that led to great clarity for Shanaz at that point in time. I still remember that, extraordinarily powerful. It was worth maybe an hour of coaching, just those few minutes that happened. I'll leave it at that. At this point in time, I'll promote Shanaz also to the panel. Michael, Larissa, any questions? And Fiona, any comments? Guys, you can unmute yourself and ask questions.
I just remembered how to do it. Dear Eva and dear Ram and dear Michael, I remember you. Larissa, I'm not sure. Anyway, hello. What I want to say was I was so touched to see that lovely image of your hands with the heart. And it reminds me of a sweet saying I read: when we learn to hold tenderly our humanness, then the work has vitality. When we learn to hold tenderly our humanness. I love that image. Thank you, dear Eva.
Thank you. I learned that from you, you know that. And the relationship that Fiona and I have established is a relationship of pure love. So, yeah.
So maybe my question is for all of us is, how can release the love that's in us all to flow in our work? Because we all have that possibility. And we know, Eva, you and I, that we've developed that capacity over some years as we've got to know each other and take our masks off. But it's quite a challenge to take the mask off, isn't it? And so I think one of the tasks of supervision is to say, should we see what's behind? Are you ready to look behind? Because we've all got a mask, and sometimes we need them, but not always.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that starts to address Ram's question is, we as supervisors need to take our masks off first, and it's not easy.
Yes.
Enable the client to take his or hers, and that requires that we really get in touch with who we are and who we're being, and that includes the somatic work, and we put it all there for the client. So I will. So let me share. Larissa knows this story. I have told that story in the Congress. I was being trained as a supervisor in the UK. I had just started to work with Fiona. I think we had our third or fourth session together. It was a one-year training. And I came back from one of the modules, and we had a call, and I was in tears. And I said, Fiona, I did horrible things in that module. I was rude, and I'm so ashamed. I reacted to one of the faculty members in a way that I don't approve of. And, you know, and I was crying, and I was saying, I cannot be a supervisor. How can someone who behaves like this be a supervisor, not even a coach? I don't think I'm fit to work. So that's because I had already developed some level of trust, not the one I have today, of course, because this is much deeper. But at that point, I trusted enough to tell her so. And the way Fiona helped me was, okay, so I said something like, I'm going to be polite. This is not exactly what I said. What I said is, I'm so messed up. I've been in therapy for many years, and it doesn't, and I still do these things. How can it be a coach? But I did use rougher language. And Fiona took off her mask, and she replied in the same language. So again, I'm going to adapt it. And she said, you know what? I'm messed up too. Welcome to humanity. And from tears, I started to laugh. Because of the fact that Fiona said that word that she would normally not say, we could then laugh together. I went from great shame to so much trust and love. And what I felt then was that Fiona had carried me in her arms from a place of guilt and shame to a place of love and trust. And this, for me, is a landmark in my professional learning journey, in my learning journey as a human being. And I learned it in relationship with Fiona. And she did it very spontaneously. And she still laughs when I say it was a horrible word. So that's, I think that's what is required, yes.
It's lovely to be reminded of how rude I can be at times.
You just met me where I was,
Yeah,
where I needed to be met.
yeah, yeah. Mm.
Very gently.
Mm. Sometimes rough language is the best because it comes from the gut.
Mm.
Mm. So thank you. Mm.
Thank you.
John wants to know what is the exact word that you used. Actually, he's very, very curious and also very naughty. So it's up to you. You can say no to him. That's all right.
I can say it begins with F and ends in K.
Okay.
Exactly. That's it.
Larissa has had good laughs about this.
There's a question here which you might like to look at, Eva. David has asked a question. I think taking one's mask off is very vital to being an effective coach. I think it comes down to being very honest with yourself and your coachee. But is this a good thing to do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the learnings that I took to one of the questions that I took to supervision. When do you share? When you think it's in service of your client. So I'll tell you another story, because I think that the cases, they bring this conversation to life. So Ram just mentioned he was being trained in a supervisor. He just completed training, just like Michael and Larissa, with Damon Goldvarg. Damon Goldvarg also runs a Spanish-speaking program to certify supervisors. And in one of his cohorts, one of the students was his mom. So Damon calls me and says, I need you to supervise my mom, because I cannot supervise her for obvious reasons. There's a conflict of interest. And I said, yeah, okay, let's do it. I hadn't met her, and I can share this story because I have her permission. Otherwise I wouldn't. But I have had her permission to share it. So, so the day comes to supervise Norma. I had met her at congresses and conferences. And I felt I was nervous and my heart was pounding. She was an MCC at that time. She had been an MCC already for many years. I was applying for my MCC at that point. And she is so accomplished, so much more experienced than I am. She's a great mentor coach. And I was restless. On top of it, she's Dana's mother. So, and I felt uncomfortable. And all this time I was, what's going on with me? What's going on with me? And I started to breathe and my heart was still pounding. So I said, Norma, I need to share something with you. I'm feeling very vulnerable at this point. And this is what's happening to me in my body. And I guess it's because I hold you in this place. And I'd like you to know this, because so we can build a relationship where we can both be ourselves, irrespective of experience and titles, and just work together. And she loved it. And it was interesting, again, I6 informing I5, we found out that the whole information around the system that day was about vulnerability. The coach was finding it very hard to be vulnerable with the coachee, and the coachee could not be vulnerable, so on. So I used it just there, and I used it in service of the relationship and the learning together, and not just to discharge. I don't know if that helps.
Damien used to talk about this particular experience, and yeah, she was an MCC much before Damien, actually. So even the question, one of the things nobody has asked from India, one of the things that I found when I was going through the training and I was getting familiar with supervision was that Indians as a rule, perhaps Asians as well, have a serious problem in being, in having direct communication in their coaching. Like you said about the lady with teenagers and so on, here it is pretty normal with anybody, perhaps because culturally we work on the basis that you should be, I mean, you cannot be challenging, or you cannot be rude, or you could be respectful, whatever that could be. To what extent does it affect the effectiveness of supervision?
Direct communication.
Yeah. The absence of direct communication.
Or the absence of direct. In the absence of, well, that's, again, my little bag. Then you cannot be yourself. You're holding information that might be useful. It's very tentative, as I said. You're careful, but you use it. You use it. I've seen Fiona in a demo supervising a coach who was being judgmental. And he said, no, I don't want to judge. And Fiona very kindly said, but you were, in this case, weren't you? Just in her own way of doing it. So I think this is a competency that, of course, it's, in Brazil, it's the same. We're very relational in Brazil. Of course, cultural will affect the relationship, but still, if it's the whole package. And then I think this has to be contracted right from the beginning. I take a lot of time in contracting. And I talk about cultural differences. I supervise people now from many parts of the world. And I say it might be culturally sensitive, but we may need to agree on this so we can be open about it for your own benefit and that of the system and your clients.
Thanks, Eva. There is a question from Elaine. Had a situation where the coach was resistant to supervision. Lots of defenses. Being compassionate was helpful. Tough coach to work with. It was exhausting experience. Any other suggestions? Thanks.
Oh, Elaine. So I will quote Peter Hawkins. We feel exhausted. We're doing work. We're coming from effort, not from source. So what would resource you? And what kind of courageous conversations might you want to have with the supervisee that felt resistant to you? What might be going on for him? What might be difficult? So again, the direct communication is important. So we link the two aspects. To go and investigate, but not from a judgmental point of view, just reading information from the system and using it as information, not as a hypothesis or anything, and then to explore together. I don't know if that answers.
Okay, if Elaine has another question, I'll come back. Viji had a question in the meantime. She asked basically about the difference between mentoring and supervision, but it seems like it's a little more, a little deeper than that. Viji, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Ram. Eva, thank you so much for clarifying the difference, because that's something that's been playing in my mind as I wasn't able to understand the specifics between the two processes. There was something that you mentioned that mentor coaching is more about the competencies and the conversation around that. And for the supervision bit of it, you had mentioned 3 or 4 typical scenarios that a coach may come in with. The first one, for example, spoke about am I being too critical of myself or something like that. Yes. Now, while the question itself may have seemingly nothing to do with competencies, the dialogue and the conversation could take us back into the core competency framework. So how do we then keep it in the supervision part and not the mentor coaching?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. So remember, one of the I's is I too. And we look at the interventions. And there we're looking at competencies. Well, we're looking at what the coach is doing. So there is a little bit of mentor coaching and supervision, if you will. But the purpose is not to enhance the competencies, just the competencies. The purpose is to have a bigger picture and to see who you are being in that relationship and what are the relationships between themselves. How does that affect your work? What might you try to do or be differently? Or who might you want to be differently? I don't know if that answers. And there's something else that I'd like to add to that, because it also links to Ram's initial questions. So I talked about the doing, and that is true for mentor coaching for ACC level and PCC level. But when we talk about mentor coaching for MCC level, it's already about the being, because it's all about the being. So the boundaries get a little bit more blurred.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Eva. That is a beautiful response, because I think I was more coming in from my experience with mastery training, where Ram was my mentor coach.
Yeah.
And, so I after that program, the difference between doing and being completely has blurred. Mm-hmm. And it's really in that state of being where I come from. But I really liked what you said about, the goal of supervision is not, competencies, while competencies could be a part of it. So, exactly. Would I be right in then summarizing, saying, supervision is this much broader thing amongst which the focus on competencies is a subset, could be a subset?
Absolutely, absolutely. The competencies are an important subset, but they are not the focus.
Thank you.
So there is an overlap. That's why it's confusing. Of course, there's an overlap, and we're talking in a didactic way. But of course, then we have a bigger system, which is who is the coach? What's his level of mastery? And then, of course, we have to adapt it. But for beginner coaches or still beginning PCC level, it's a totally different game. It's a totally different conversation, not a game. I don't like that word. Let me rephrase it.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We have a little over 5 minutes. In the meantime, Michael, Larissa, Shanaz, if any of you have any questions, or if there is anybody else who would like to come on the panel and ask questions.
Oh, I still have something in my little bag that I'd like to share.
Okay.
Which is the case that I thought of, and then you can jump in with questions about that or anything else later. But I think that's the case that explains why, from my point of view, resourcing is fundamental for the other two functions to be fully explored. So Mary is a coach in a company for working as a coach, hired for a company who's the sponsor of development program for high potentials. And Mary has worked already with several high potentials, beautiful work, and now she's working with John, a new high potential. And she's had 5 sessions with John, 7 more to go. HR calls her and says, we don't think that John was a right choice. I think we were wrong. He's not a high potential. Actually, we'd like you to know he's not evolving, and we will be firing him in 3 months. Just for you to know, so you can work with him, getting him more employable. This is a case that sort of encapsulates 5 or 6 different versions of this situation that I have had coachees bring into supervision. Different details, but that's the main idea. So there is an ethical aspect here, of course, or several ethical aspects here, and that's the qualitative function that we would look into. What is HR asking her to do? HR is creating an agenda. HR is bringing information about that she cannot share with a client. So there's a problem here. Then there's the developmental part for her. How does she react? How should she have reacted? Because she didn't say a thing. She froze. But mainly, think of how Mary feels when she comes to supervision with that case. She did not react. She just heard that and knows it was wrong, but didn't do a thing. And now she comes to supervision and says, what do I do? So think of the person or the professional, but the emotional part of this, of what's going on with Mary at that point. So if Mary is not fully resourced, how could we go into the qualitative and developmental part? If she's in shame or in guilt or in fear, because she's also wondering, do they think my work is not being effective? Am I not being a good coach for Joe? Is it my fault? There's so many questions around that. So that's a case that I hope illustrates my point of view about the resourcing function. So Ram, back to you. Thank you.
It's a kind of, yeah, amazing, though it was very, very short. Yeah, that can take a full 1 hour to talk about. Fiona, any last words before we close?
Right, online again. Thank you so much. Heartwarming session, always, as ever, just to have dialogue. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was amazing, Eva. Thank you very, very much. I just want to share one thing with you, Fiona. When I mentioned to Eva that Damien had put me in touch with you, he said, "Oh, Fiona, you know, those of us who know her, when we hear her name, we go like this." And that is what I would like to do to both of you on that. And also, just to share with you, 23rd of July would be a red letter day for me. That was a day that I had lunch in London with Fiona, and then I went to Bath to Peter to have supper with him. So it was an extraordinary day where two of the greatest, as far as supervision is concerned and coaching is concerned, I was able to meet in the same day. Now, a person left is you, Eva. One of these days, whether it is in South or North America, we shall meet, or in India. Okay, thank you very, very much. And I thank all of you who've been with us, both on the panel and in the audience. Thank you very, very much. Please, in future, if you really want to participate in the panel, just let me know. Put your hands up. There is a system for that, and you will be there. Once again, thank you all. It's good night in India. Good day to you wherever you are. All the best. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ram. Lots of love to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.